roll call.
I just asked for one favor in the chat so that I don't make anyone totally off today. Thank you. You're amazing. Thank you. All right, should I call the roll?
Before, can anybody see Ted Foss?
I can see you.
I see you, Ted.
Okay, that's weird because I don't see
I
him.
can see you. This is Rita.
Okay, I'll figure it out on my end.
Your shirt looks fabulous.
Thank you. I was going to put a Hawaiian background as well, but I thought that might just be too much.
Never. All right, Virginia Bloomshire,
Here.
Those pictures.
Colleen Burns,
Here.
Ted Foss.
Here.
All right, here I'm going to do it. Madhurima Chakravarti. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Here.
I'm going to get better. It's going to take me a minute, but I'm going to get better. Matt Fruth
Here.
and Sarah Glavin also here.
Okay, we have called to order and had our roll call, and we will now have our installation of elected library board trustees. Village Clerk Christina Waters, would you be so kind?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. It looks like we have Madhurima on first. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. If you can please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Madhurima Chakravarti,
I, Madhurima Chakravarti,
having been elected to the office of library trustee
having been elected to the office of library trustee
in the village of Oak Park,
in the village of Oak Park,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of library trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the library trustee
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And next, I believe we have Sarah Glavin.
All right.
And if you can please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Sarah Glavin,
I, Sarah Glavin,
having been elected to the office of library trustee
having been elected to the office of library trustee
in the village of Oak Park,
in the village of Oak Park,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of library trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of library trustee
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Matt. If you can please again raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Matthew Fruth,
I, Matthew Fruth,
having been elected to the office of library trustee
having been elected to the office of library trustee
in the village of Oak Park,
in the village of Oak Park,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of library trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of library trustee
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations, Matthew.
Thank you very much.
you. Absolutely.
So it's a little bit like a Las Vegas wedding to see the clerk there in her car.
My sincerest apologies. I had softball and baseball drop off today, and I was like, I'm going to get it done.
What we do.
Well, for having me. Have a
Thank
great.
you.
Christina.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Christina.
All right, we will move on to, now that we have been sworn in, this is now the beginning of our official term as this iteration of the board. So we will now have our roll call again as a call to order of our newly constituted board.
You're gonna get me with the program, aren't you, Matt? Virginia Bloomshire.
Here?
Colleen Burns.
Here.
Ted Foss.
Here.
Madhurima Chakravarti.
Here.
Matt Fruth.
Here,
And Sarah Glavin here.
excellent. Thank you. And we will now have the report of the board nominating committee.
David, did you want me to provide the report?
Yes, please, Colleen, if you don't mind.
Happy to. So we met on the 10th. We are delighted to present a slate of candidates this evening for the position of board president. We are suggesting Matt Fruth. For vice president, Ted Foss. For secretary, Sarah Glavin. And for finance officer, Virginia Bloomshire. Do we do discussion now, Matt? This is my first time going through a slate.
Well, if there are no other nominations to be made from the floor, as it were, we would accept the report as a slate nomination to be voted upon. Are there, at this time, are there any other nominations for board officers? Hearing none. The report from the committee serves as a motion. Is there a second?
So moved.
Okay, we have the second by Sarah. And will the secretary, if there's no other discussion, will the secretary take the roll, please?
Happy to. Virginia Bloom.
Aye.
Colleen Burns.
Aye.
Ted Foss.
Aye.
Madhurima Chakravarti.
Aye.
Matt Fruth. Sorry. Sarah Glavin, yes.
Excellent. Thank you all. I appreciate your confidence and your support, and welcome to Virginia as our finance officer. We shall move ahead to our approval of our minutes. First up will be the April 27th regular meeting. Are there any discussions or questions or corrections regarding those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Ted got a motion. I believe Virginia got the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no other discussion, will the secretary call the vote, please? Take the vote.
Virginia Bloom.
Yes.
Colleen Burns.
Yes.
Ted Foss.
Yes.
Madhurima Chakravarti.
Yes.
Matt Fruth.
Yes.
Sarah Glavin is also yes.
Okay, excellent. We will now have the minutes of the nominating committee. Are there any questions regarding that? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Sarah, is there a second?
I'll
Second,
second.
Colleen? And if there's no other discussion, Sarah, will you please take the roll call again?
All right, I'm going to drop last names. Is that okay?
Yes.
Virginia,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Ted,
yes,
Matarima,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
and Sarah is also yes.
Excellent. Okay, now on to public comments. I received one public comment earlier today. Let me find that very quickly. I'll forward it to Rita for inclusion in the minutes, but the summation of it, a library resident had written opposing the appointment of Peter Prokopowicz as to fill the vacancy on the board. So I will forward that to Rita so that we can include that as an addendum, as an attachment to the minutes for next month's approval. We have no other public comments present. I did not receive any other emails. David, did you?
I have not received any other comments from anyone. There may, I don't know if there's anyone present tonight, Matt, who might want to say something before we introduce John.
I don't think so. I mean, if anybody does, now's your chance to speak up. I'm not hearing anyone, so
Okay,
let's
great.
move on to John.
Awesome. Well, we are honored to have John Barrero with us this evening, Executive Director of the Collaboration for Early Childhood. He'd like to just have a few minutes of your time to speak with you and talk about the renewal of the Oak Park Library's support for the collaboration. So welcome, John.
Thank you very much, David. Gosh, I feel very lucky. I feel like I got to observe a ritual here, just everyone sort of being installed. It's amazing how many people get to see this moment. But it's my pleasure to be here today. We're at the Collaboration for Early Childhood, we endeavor to be the voice for children from 0 to 5 and their families, as well as their teachers in the community. And the library has been a longstanding partner of ours. We really couldn't do our work without collaboration from the library. And that's really what the letter that we submitted shows. I think in every way we've had to be partners with the library in how we deliver training to teachers and how we reach our families. Our families rely upon the library, see the library as the center of their community. And because we want to reach those families as well, we're often doing work hand in hand with the library. So it's been I think it's been a really good partnership and we're proud of it. And so this is, I guess you could say this is another ritual of us, reaching out to renew the bond, the collaboration that we have that we like to put forward. And we've done some new work and I'm hoping to be able to do more new work. The way we outlined this request for support was around supporting of the annual symposium, which is a way for us to reach teachers and provide professional development for them in Oak Park. But I think what's great about it is that even though the funding's for that, we've got a list of other initiatives that we do in tandem and that we do in partnership that I think are really important. The most recent one was a summer program that we joined last summer and that we're going to join again this year called Ready Set Kindergarten to help prepare children going into kindergarten for their first kindergarten year. I think that work will be so much more important this year in the middle of COVID, where we've had kids home. And so I think that partnership is going to be vital. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited that the library is going to be our partner for that. And in a lot of other ways, we just held an equity summit this past weekend where the library again was a partner and a speaker at our event. So I think there's a lot to show about our relationship, and so it's a pleasure for me to be here to speak to that. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I really just wanted to sort of thank you all for the partnership that we have, for the ways in which our work together helps us to be better and to do better for our community. I don't know if anyone has any questions about how we do our work together, but I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, John. If anyone has any questions for John, you can take some time to ask them now.
I just have a quick comment. In the past, I've wondered why we would choose a particular entity to collaborate with, and why library funds for this? Why not from some other village entity? But I've come to realize that indeed the work of the Collaboration for Early Childhood is integral to the library's mission.
Well, thank you for that. And I agree. And we do also rely upon the support of a lot of other village entities as well. We get support from D97, D200, from the actual village office, from the Park District. We're working right now on a collaborative work with the township. So I think we're trying to be partners to everyone. We've got over 80 active partners. But then we have a core group of, our people, and you're one of them. The institutions that really mean a lot and hold up what happens in our community. So thank you for that. I appreciate the comment. We feel the same way about you guys.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for John?
John, I will just ask, can you talk a little bit about some of the, not necessarily library related, but some of the changes and the hurdles that you guys ran across, especially with younger kids this last year, and with kids not being able to be vaccinated yet? Are you seeing some changes that you're going to be carrying as we do start, with that kindergarten readiness program and some of the other items for younger kids?
Sure. So we're really invested in what happens with families. We have a range of supports, everything from giving basic child development information to the more intensive home visiting program. We have a home visiting contract with Easter Seals, and we're the largest one in our area to provide home visiting, which is an intensive home-based program. And so we have a few ways to understand the needs of families. And what we saw was a real shift during COVID of what used to be just sort of enhancement and support to assistance with basic needs. What used to be requests from families around training or information around child development or parent empowerment then became requests that sounded like, we don't have food right now, and we want to be able to host you to come over to our house to visit us, but we're struggling a little bit, or we didn't pay the utility bills this month, or the rent, and so we're kind of in a bind right now. Or things like we would have a session and they would say, well, the problem with me going to the session is that I don't have anyone now to take care of my kids, so I have my kids home with me all day. And so it meant a little bit of a pivot on our part to look at what's really important to them, and what used to be important to them before COVID had changed. We realized that we can't ask a family to completely invest in an empowerment program or an education program if they're worried about food or if they're worried about housing. So we shifted a little bit during the pandemic to offer those other kinds of support. We actually applied for some funding also from the Community Foundation to be able to sort of delve more into the COVID specific support. And I think it was a success. We really got we were able to help a lot of parents. We did things that we never did before. We shifted our focus to really basically being a COVID support provider during the pandemic. And we're seeing a way out of it now that parents are going back to work and they're looking at schools opening up again and people are sort of moving towards stability. Our support for them has been helping them find those resources and then preparing for what we used to be able to offer. So there's been a lot of that support. I mentioned the summer support because, really, we really feel as if these 5 years of ramp up to kindergarten are vital. So many of the milestones that happen are key to a kid's success. And all the studies, there's so much research that shows that if a kid enters kindergarten behind, they're already standing in front of a mountain that's too hard to climb. And that seems shocking to people, but it's really well supported and documented that kids need that support and need that training before they get to kindergarten. And then we know that there are disparities in who gets to kindergarten ready and who doesn't. Families that are better off are more likely to have the supports they needed to get to kindergarten. Children with disabilities are more likely to have issues when they get to kindergarten. We find that it cuts across race and socioeconomics. So not just socioeconomics, but also race. It's Black and brown kids are less likely to get to kindergarten ready. But that's something that we're making progress on. We do kindergarten readiness testing in conjunction with D97 when kids enter school. And when we started doing this work, next year will be our 20th anniversary doing this work. When we started doing this work, there were big gaps. It was just very bluntly stated. It was well-to-do families and white children who were doing the best. And then it was families of color who were doing really poorly. And their kids would start off, and not just families of color, but families who didn't have the financial means were getting to kindergarten and their kids were way behind. And what we've tried to do is provide these supports to close that gap. And just this year, we saw a leveling of the gap. We're really proud of that. Our annual report, which is on our website, outlines how we looked, and we didn't see differences this past year, the year right before COVID. We didn't see any differences between kids from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and we didn't see any differences across race. So we were just enormously proud of this. And we know it's a small sample and it's 1 year. We've only got just under 700 kids who go into kindergarten, but we're going to hold on to that as a victory. And I think it's consistent pushing, consistent sort of persistence year after year that's going to make this happen. I'm concerned as the ED about what happened this year during COVID. I know that a lot of supports that kids are supposed to get, they weren't getting. Imagine the kid, imagine the child who used to get one-on-one support around the developmental disability, who hasn't had it for a year and who now has to enter kindergarten and who we want to thrive. But we know he's been home with a mom who's been out of work without a therapist or without the kind of support that he would need. And maybe there are social skills that weren't developed as they should have been during the preschool years, and maybe whatever developmental issues were going on that weren't supported. So our focus this year, the way it's manifested, is in looking at the ways in which some support didn't happen and how we can sort of help still support that transition. The summer program's a small one. There's only so much we can do in the summer before. But last year we were able to take in 40 families to support them, and we filled up in just a number of days. It was a free program, and we basically couldn't take them in fast enough. The opportunities were gone within a week. I applied for some funding this year, and I got some extra funding. So we should be able to increase that by 50% this year. So I'm excited that we're going to hopefully be able to take 60 kids. And that's a partnership with the library that we have as well. You guys also work with that from your end. So I'm excited, and 60 kids might not seem like a lot, but it's 1/10 of our population going into kindergarten. And it's a difference that we're going to make for those 60 families who are probably concerned about what's going to happen to their kids in kindergarten. So I don't know, Virginia, that I answered all of your questions. I kind of have a narrative. My staff tell me I have like a narrative way of answering questions. I do my storytelling, and you got to find your answers in there somewhere. It's because I was a preschool teacher and I'm used to sort of everything being a story. But I don't know if that gives you a sense of sort of how things have changed. Families have been desperate, and we've been their sort of buoy in the storm. And we've embraced that. We're happy to be like the people that families turn to. There was a time when families were resistant to have people in their homes. But ironically, during COVID, even though we didn't always go, we're only starting to do in-person stuff now, but they were more than happy to have us go into their homes via video. So we actually engaged more effectively during COVID because I think families felt alone, and they thought, well, here I have a home visitor who wants to talk to me. I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to sort of, let them sort of meet with me for an hour in my living room via video. And so we were able to make connections that were harder to make before. And we're happy for that too. I don't know, but this all happens. This all happens. This all happened because of COVID, but it all happens because of all the partnerships we have. So we couldn't do it alone. We really do rely upon all the other providers in the community to help us.
John, did you feel like you had the resources that you needed to meet the increase in need?
We had to apply for funding. And part of, without going to sort of down that rabbit hole, the money that we have, the funding that we have is usually for very specific things. There wasn't any money that we had specifically for the COVID needs before the pandemic, and we're really careful. I didn't feel comfortable applying some of the money we had to that. So I applied for money instead, and we got it, and we were able to use that. And thank God for the Community Foundation, where they were able to put forward COVID specific money, so we were able to use that to meet some of those needs. But yeah, I mean, another thing that the collaboration saw this year that we've never seen before is that we fully utilized our contract with the Village D200 and D97. So we've maxed our budget and had the greatest impact that we've ever had this year. We're always looking to grow, and I'm always looking for opportunities to expand our work. I was telling David about this. I've been working really hard to create partnerships with the Austin community, for example. We have a lot of shared goals, and I think there are lots of ways for us to work in tandem. So we're looking at writing for grants together so that we can, for example, we can look at our family childcare providers from both communities, bring them together, and work with them together, for goodness sakes, because the families don't see the imaginary line between our two communities. They just come back and forth. They shop here, they bring the kids to school there, they go back home across the street. So it's these partnerships, I think, are responsive to what we're seeing in the community around us. So those hopefully will provide new opportunities for us and new funding too.
I actually, I have a couple of questions. Is that okay?
I'm here. You got me.
I'm new. So
Yes, by all means.
thank you. So this is really interesting, John. And I really appreciate it, and I appreciate hearing about it. I'm wondering two things. One is when we'll have a sense of the numbers. I know that you said last year we didn't really see a difference, across like income levels or race, and
Yeah.
my assumption is that we will this year because of COVID, but I'm wondering when we would see those numbers, you think, or because I know the kindergarten readiness tests haven't been done yet, right?
Correct. So we have a contract with Chapin Hall, who helps us with our data management and how we collect this information. And the last conversation we had with them, we pretty much all agreed that this wouldn't be a good year for data collection. We think doing the kindergarten readiness test as they enter school, having been out for a year, we thought wasn't going to give us good data. We weren't going to be able to sort of properly assess how kids are doing. So I think what's going to happen is it'll be another year when we giving kids some time to be back in the school system, to be back sort of in a classroom environment where we can then sort of see how that progress is made. So the simple answer to the question is conducting the KRT involves a collaboration with the school system and a build-up within school, and kids haven't had it. And the teachers beginning the school year aren't necessarily ready to do the testing either. I think there are other things that we do. We do ongoing screening. We do something called the Ages and Stages questionnaire, which screens around developmental progress and social emotional progress. So that's something the collaboration holds within the early childhood space. But I think the one measure that we're going to probably lose this year is the one in between, the one that the transition to kindergarten one, because so much of the data will be inconsistent. So even if we do collect some of it, I think we're really hesitating to look at it as part of a trend because we had a pandemic. I think what we want to do is we want to look at the year before and then the year after the pandemic and then link those up.
Sure. Oh, that's really interesting. Because my second question was going to be if there was some way to, I mean, obviously it's early childhood, so there wouldn't be a way to go beyond 5-year-olds or into kindergarten. But since there was this like crazy year, I'm just trying to figure, I was wondering what would happen to those kids or any kids who didn't get the kind of resources, that we would need or would have been served by our program. So I'm just.
we'll have the other kids to see it. We have what's called a directors roundtable. So monthly, where we work with program directors from preschools where they give us reports on what's happening with their kids. And for the publicly funded programs in Oak Park, we pay for authentic assessment. So we get really good information about how the development is going. So we'll have a lens that we could use to see how some of the kids are doing. And we'll have, except for the ones that are graduating, we've got the whole other cohort of kids.
Right.
So if you figure we have, according to census data, there are about 3,000 kids under 5 in Oak Park. We've still got the rest who are not
Right,
graduating over, the other 2,400. And then what we're hearing about is things like um, older infants and younger toddlers who are not showing the social skill advancement that they should be, who are not acclimating to working with other kids, who are showing attachment issues, who are showing what looks like responses to stress in young kids. Kids are remarkably resilient, but they show their stress and they show their responses to trauma in different ways. So it might look like attachment, over attachment, or, in other words, I'm unwilling to leave my mother because I'm afraid. Or it might look like aggression when they get into a classroom environment. That's another thing that we support around. We have a clinician consultant that we send out to programs to help them when they have kids that are having behavior issues, with the goal of retaining kids in classrooms. We know that at the end of the day, we want kids to stay in the classroom environment. And we have a national problem with expulsion and suspension of kids in preschool. When too often when we see behavior issues in classrooms, those children end up being sent home or being sent out of the program. And we know the research shows us that starts a trend. So what we try and do in the early space, which we can still do in these first four important years before they go to kindergarten, is help retain that kid. A 3-year-old who gets sent home or has to. We've spoken to parents who 3-year-olds have been in 3 or 4 different programs. We just had the summit this past weekend where a parent spoke passionately about how her 3-year-old was expelled from an Oak Park preschool program and how devastated it was to her family to be told that your 3-year-old was being expelled and being sent home. If we can stop that trend, we start kids on a positive trajectory through school. So we focus on that. We focus on building that kind of consistency, building a sense that these kids belong in school, that they have a space in our school system, and that all contributes also to their success later. So yeah, we're gonna miss that probably that year before kindergarten for this one cohort of kids. Well, we've got 2,000 other kids who really need this kind of support, and we're lucky we're still gonna have access to them. So I'm hopeful. I'm operating from a place of hope. We do professional development for kindergarten teachers as well. So we've been working really hard at that because it's really hard to do cross systems. But we're trying to put together groups where we have preschool teachers meet with kindergarten teachers and talk together about what the expectations are for classrooms. It's a very hard thing to do, but we've made progress on that because we have a great relationship with D97. So once things are back to normal, we're looking forward to continuing that and having them meet together and really agree on what skills children should have. And that'll be a big step. That'll be big progress for us. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Of course. This is a pleasure. I mean, I've devoted my career for the last 30 years to supporting families and kids under 5. So opportunities that I have like this to sort of share that with other people, that's what I'm here for. That's what we're in this career for.
Thank you very, very much, John, for everything.
Of course. A pleasure. It's a pleasure to be able to support our community this way. Does anyone else have questions for me? I see you guys have a full agenda. Oh, there's a 55-page agenda. Maybe it's not all. It's like our board meetings. We do the same thing.
Lots of financial transactions.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you, John. We very much appreciate your time.
Of course, my pleasure. So then I'll go ahead and,
Thank you,
if
John.
anyone has any questions after today, please know that you can find my email on our website, and I welcome any questions or comments or anything. Okay, stay in touch.
And John, there is a, just so you know, there is an item of action on the agenda regarding the collaboration a little later in the meeting.
Okay. You can just connect with me and let me know if there's anything more for me. Thank you, David. Thank you all. I appreciate your time today.
Okay. Now on to trustee comments and board calendar. Are there any trustee comments or?
I had a quick question, just regarding the calendar. And David, I think this is just as you're hearing kind of other village entities talk about, what reopening looks like. Clearly, we're where we are in the state. We're not out of the woods, so to speak. But I think as vaccination rates continue to improve in the community, I'm seeing kind of trends towards some organizations that are considering kind of outdoor congregation types of events. Is there any expectation around, maybe not returning to things like Day in Our Village, but are you and the staff starting to hear some community conversations about, what the library may be asked to do as part of that kind of reconnection across other community entities?
We're hearing some, sure. There are major events that are typically held in the village each year that are not going to take place this year. Day in Our Village is I think one of the most obvious ones that will not. The Independence Day Parade will not. But there are other outdoor events that are going to be taking place. I think obviously the farmers market is. I think various park district programs will be, and of course the library is planning to have some outdoor programs as well. But other than some of that, I haven't been approached by a lot of other organizations or groups asking us to participate in a lot of outdoor programs. I know that the Village of Oak Park is beginning to permit permits for some block parties again. And as you all know, the library is often a fixture at block parties with our book bike. But for now, I think that what we're going to be doing in terms of programs, at least for the time being, is and for at least part of the summer, I think is going to be some outdoor programs. And as the state moves further along its plans, and as we progress in ours, we'll of course be announcing whatever changes we decide to make in hours, services, in-person programs, whether those are outside or inside the building.
Okay, I think the one question that's come up from a couple of community members, and I think part of it is trying to think through kind of how do we create safe space, especially for kind of our near West Side neighbors, and I was having some conversations with a couple of different organizations in Austin that are trying to figure out kind of what a safe summertime programs look like, and what Oak Park may also be offering that gives young people kind of environments to be successful. So I think as that comes along, I'd be interested in maybe hearing from the teen services team about ways that maybe, even if we're not supporting in Oak Park, that we might be considering supporting in Austin as they're thinking about what some of that summertime need may look like for the city, as they're just kind of thinking about reduction in violence measures and other opportunities for safe space.
Very good, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Let me, if you don't mind, let me just make a couple of brief comments about the board calendar. Of course, it's as complete as I could make it through the end of the year, with all of the regular board meeting dates and other events taking place. Later on in the agenda, there is time for discussion for the board to determine when and if it wants to return to in-person board meetings. For now, the information from our attorney is that there has been no definite expiration to the state's emergency declaration that allows the board to continue to meet in virtual session exclusively. So for now, that remains something that this board can decide to do or not on its own. So until we hear that the state's declaration has changed or the governor makes an announcement about that, you can continue to meet virtually, or you can decide that you'd like to perhaps begin meeting in person at some point, even before the end of the emergency declaration. But I just wanted to mention that for the June regular meeting, which is currently scheduled for June 22nd, I will actually be traveling at that time, and I will be participating in the board meeting that month in June from outside the state of Illinois, just so that I'm upfront and transparent about that. And then looking kind of further ahead, I'm going to ask the board if it would consider changing the date of your regular meeting in the month of November from the current scheduled date of November 23rd, which is 2 days before Thanksgiving, to the week before, which would be November 16th, which would be obviously a week and a half before Thanksgiving. So if the board is willing to make that adjustment, then I'd put that on the agenda for you to take action at a future meeting. So I just wanted to ask you to consider that as well. So those are the two things I wanted to say about the calendar.
Is there a strategic planning session this summer, David, that you're thinking?
I have not. We certainly can. Absolutely. I haven't thought about it, to be honest with you. Considering
that's okay.
that
I just know sometimes it falls in the summer.
Yeah, considering that we've still been working on the action plan for the anti-racism strategic plan, but we can certainly schedule a strategic planning session for the summer, depending on the board's desire to do that. Sure.
That might
I'm not
be
pushing.
a good
I just
trial
didn't see the
run.
date.
Sorry.
The strategic planning meeting might be a good trial run for us to do something in person, see how well it works. If it works well, then great. Maybe starting in the fall, we can go back to in person. But if not, if I'm more concerned with if we're going to have people for public comment, what kind of space are we going to have to make sure that anybody from the community coming in, we have ample space for people to physically be there to comment.
Well, I've already talked with my leadership team and staff and said that whenever the board is ready to resume in-person meetings, that we're going to move all meetings, at least for the foreseeable future, from the Scoville room where we typically have them to the veterans room, so that there's plenty of space for people to continue to physically distance if they want or need, and to accommodate people who might want to attend the meeting. We could never do that in the Scoville room. It's way too small and cramped. So we're going to move all of them. Whenever you decide to go back to in-person meetings, we're going to move them all to the veterans room.
Okay, thank you very much. That helps me make a mental picture of when it would be more comfortable to go back to in-person.
Right. So yes. So if the board wants to think about a strategic planning session, I would at this point I would recommend trying to perhaps do that sometime in the month of July, perhaps. We're also I might as well mention that I expect that we're going to begin, or at least I'm going to ask the board to begin conversations this year about the budget for next fiscal year even a little earlier than you normally would, because I think there are just a lot of issues that need to be discussed and a lot of priorities that need to be established, particularly regarding both what the board's expectations of tax revenue are, and also what the expectations are regarding the allocation of various resources as we continue to, or as the anti-racism advisory team continues to refine its discussion on how it believes or thinks that we should be thinking about the allocation of resources. So, typically, as you all know, or I think most of you know, our fiscal year is the village's fiscal year. So it's the calendar year, January 1 to December 31st. We typically begin early discussions around August, and then shoot for a final approval of a budget in October, so that we meet the statutory deadline to get that document to the village so that it can be included in the village's appropriation and levy ordinances. But I'm thinking we may need to begin some of those conversations, at least about revenue expectations, perhaps as early as July. So Matt, is there any questions that you have or anyone has about the calendar or anything on it?
Not from me. Anyone else?
Do we want to go ahead and move that date in November? Do we need to do something more formal?
If the board doesn't have any objection to that idea, then what I'll do is next month I'll put it on the agenda for an action item. So if I don't hear any objections, that's what I'll do.
I'm hearing no objections, David.
Great, thank you.
I give thanks anytime we're together.
Okay.
All right.
So we will move on to staff reports.
And as usual, we have my narrative, we have our longer strategic priorities report, and we have the core use statistics report. I don't really have a lot to add to what you saw in the written reports. You see here the additional services, programs, spaces, and hours of operation that we're beginning on November 1st. And right now we are expecting a pretty fast shift in the state of Illinois from the bridge phase to stage 5. And once that announcement is made, then we'll be ready to resume or announce the resumption of additional services in the final stage of our plan, including the resumption of in-person services at the Dole branch and additional hours in each of our locations. So we continue to be as thoughtful and careful about that, and as transparent as we can, and making announcements as quickly as I think we think is wise to do so that people are both informed and aware of what our plans are. The only thing I think I will add to the part about the work of the Anti-Racism Advisories team is that, because I don't think I mentioned it in my narrative, but Billy Treese, our Director of Human Resources, and I did have an additional conversation with Rashida Graham-Washington about the job description for the Director of Equity and Anti-Racism that she and her team worked on for us. And Billy and I expect to be ready to present that one more time to the advisory team before we can begin to advertise it and begin to look for our first Director of Equity and Anti-Racism. So those are the only other quick things I wanted to mention apart from what was written. But you have my report, you have the strategic priorities report, you have the core use statistics. I know that both Jody and Jeremy from the leadership team are on the call tonight too. So if any of us can answer any specific questions you have, we'll be happy to do that.
Good, 2 quick ones. One on the core use statistics. I know we're benchmarking against 2020, which seems a little strange since we weren't in regular operations. I don't know if there's a way to incorporate 2019 or other maybe more relevant operational standards so that you're maybe seeing some usage of kind of standard operating building times. So I don't know what our options are, but it just seems like a funny benchmark knowing that 2020 was not at all a normal operational year.
I can certainly have a conversation with Jody and Mallory Edgar, our data analytics manager, about that.
And whatever's, I think that just, it'd be nice to kind of know what options we have to maybe see.
Well,
see
I
a
mean,
little bit more clarity.
sure. I mean, well, the data is there. So, seeing it, I don't think is, that shouldn't be a problem at all. I'm assuming you would be interested in seeing how all 3 of these years sort of compare to each other. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it'd just be nice to kind of have a little different, balance with, and clearly regular operations are still not, like today's still not a standard day in the building.
No.
But I think just to start to see a little bit more commonality about, what maybe we would have expected pre-pandemic.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll talk with Jody and Mallory about that.
And then my other quick question, this may be a Billy question, but as I think we're likely navigating some complexities for employees who've been working from home and may have varying degrees of challenges around childcare and other issues. Are we considering or changing or updating any policies around allowing certain team members to work from home? And anything maybe Billy could share with us about how we're taking feedback and what that process is like for the team?
Sure. So of course, so many of our staff continue right now to work from home, and that's we've been accommodating that and encouraging that throughout the pandemic. But he and I and the leadership team have been talking about what that looks like as the pandemic comes to an end and as we resume, whatever we're going to call normal moving forward. And I think that there is, what we've learned certainly is that there are a lot of things that we can do, perhaps continue to do in different ways to allow people to work remotely. Things that aren't even necessarily related to needing to be distant because of something like a pandemic. For instance, before the pandemic, when we were still talking about, if you remember, a master facilities plan, and talking about how our spaces in our buildings need to be adjusted to meet changing needs and demands and desires from the community, we were, as a staff, beginning to think about how we use so many of our spaces for the work of staff members, and how we need to perhaps make some adjustments there so that we're perhaps not using as many physical spaces for staff to be working in together simultaneously, that could instead then be transformed or transitioned into spaces that are more public spaces. Well, I think one of the things we're talking about is one way to do that is to not necessarily have all of our staff in the building all together every day at the same time, and figuring out ways to allow staff members to do some work remotely, so that we don't need to have as much space in the building for staff members. So yeah, I mean, there are things that we're talking about and thinking about, and certainly there are policy implications there too. We've been still thinking about all of the policies that RGW audited for us, and as I mentioned in my report, we'll soon be thinking about bringing some recommended policy revisions back to the board for you to consider, that are have specifically been adjusted according to the equity lens that was applied there. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that those are definitely some of the things that we're thinking.
It does. I think I was just thinking about, a lot of businesses right now, I think, are going through similar experiences where they're trying to figure out what is a fair policy for workplace adjustment look like, and what does that mean for space needs. So I think it's exactly in line with what I was looking for. I just think as you know more, and maybe it's not even next month, but as you start to get more formal about us moving towards, to your point, whatever normal looks like, I think I'd appreciate staying close on what that looks like for the staff.
Sure, absolutely.
I do apologize, but my cat Noodles has joined the meeting.
That's quite all right. Are there any other questions about any of the reports?
I had one from your report, David. I was wondering if at this time you could, you or perhaps Virginia could expand a little bit on the equity personas that you mentioned about identifying marginalized groups within the library stakeholdership.
Well,
I'm just
actually,
wondering how that might.
well, so that's right. So that's a big part of what Jody has been working with Mickey Grace on through the communications plan. And I believe Jody is still in our meeting. Perhaps
Yes.
Jody, you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about what that is?
Sure, no problem. So personas in a general sense are often referred to as fictional characters that marketers will use when they're trying to identify how to talk or market products or services to certain audiences. So early on in the work, we got a 20-page communications toolkit from RGW as part of our work, working with them as consultants. And it is strongly advised from their perspective that we, as an organization, but also as a communications team, take the time to work through those personas. And if we are working now to decenter whiteness as the place where we communicate from, whether it be public formal communications or more informal internal communications, or a mix of all the above, that we take the time to think through the details of who are the people we're talking to. And that gets to, defining your audience, which is the number one step, I think, in any successful communications plan. So we did some preliminary work on it last week. We're going to do more this week. Our hope is that we are able to develop personas both inside and outside of the library that help everybody communicate and understand the importance of what they're communicating when we're talking about the work related to the anti-racism journey. Okay, blah, blah, blah. That was a lot that I said. But what's a good example? A good example might be, let's take a template. And I don't have the template. I can follow up and show you what the template is. But an example would be you walk through and you say, okay, we're gonna pick a name for this person. We're gonna, what is their gender? Where do they live? What is their marital status? How old are they? What do they do? What do they like? Where do they live? The idea is you're creating real people so that you're able to be much more specific with how you talk to them. So I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Are there any other questions?
Hearing none. We'll go
Can
on to our.
I chime in for just 1 second while we have Jody still on the line? I wanted to thank David and Jody and a lot of people when we're talking about some of the library core use statistics. I've been trying to kind of dive into our library access to LinkedIn, and we ran into a little bit of a snafu where names do not go on the certificates after they're earned. If you earn these LinkedIn learning certificates through your public library. And everyone, Jody and everybody on the team at the library has been really great with helping me to kind of brainstorm a way to go around that and make sure that when somebody posts this on their LinkedIn account, that the credentials and the hard work put into them are taken seriously. And not dismissed simply because somebody doesn't have their name on it. And I know that there were a lot of things that went into the agreement between the ALA and LinkedIn Learning related to, Jody, you explained it to me, related to data security and privacy that made this a little bit difficult. But I just wanted to, formally thank you guys for the help that you gave and looking into that. I will probably be asking you more questions on it just because I know it's an equity related issue. Being able to access all of this without paying for it, but then not being able to see the credential in the same way as somebody who has paid for it. But yes, thank you very, very much. I personally will continue to take all of mine without paying for them through my local public library, because why would you not? And posting, smarmy messages on LinkedIn about how, this was earned through a partnership with the ALA and our local library. And hopefully, if we can get enough people to do something along those lines, we can start to normalize these credentials not having somebody's name on them. But I just wanted to say thank you very, very much. I know there was a lot of talking back and forth and lots of ideas being bounced around, and thank you very much for taking it seriously.
Thank you, Virginia.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
was one of the more unpleasant negotiations between a vendor like LinkedIn and our national association.
Okay, we'll move on to our financial reports. We have our resolution on our disbursements. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Sarah. Is there a second?
Second.
I heard Virginia by a scotch. Are there any questions about our disbursements reports? Hearing none, will the secretary take the roll, please?
Virginia.
Aye.
Colleen.
Hi.
Ted.
Aye.
Matarima.
Aye.
Matt.
Aye.
Sarah's an aye.
Excellent. So that is approved. We have our other financial reports and the narrative report. Does anyone have any questions or for David or Jeremy?
I don't think this is very related, but I do have a question. Obviously a lot of people are constantly talking about the, oh my God, the word is slipping out of my head. The returning some of the things to the population. Oh my God. What am I talking about?
The tax levy.
Thank you. Yes, the tax levy. The question that I had was this: when it comes to returning, my concern is property taxes. Of course, they would continue to be as high as they were even under COVID. So I see that it's a little bit higher than last year. I think that's typical. I don't know if anybody here knows the answer to this, but I'm wondering, in the case that, taxing bodies return some of the levies to, they resolve to return some of the levies, do you know if those go back to renters? The question that do you know what I mean? Like, because obviously renters see the flip side. When property taxes increase, their rent increases. But when the levies are returned, they don't make it back to renters. Am I correct about that?
Correct. Anything related to a tax bill would go to the person whose name is on the bill. So it would be the property owner.
So the property owners are more advantaged by returns on the tax levy than, is that right?
Yeah, if we did any kind of reduction in our budget, that would result in that. it would benefit property owners, not necessarily. Yeah, I wouldn't say, yeah, it would not necessarily benefit all residents. It would benefit all property owners.
Okay, all right, that's what I was thinking. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
And Jeremy loves to sit and talk about the budget, which is a wonderful way to spend an afternoon. I know you do, Jeremy.
Anytime anybody wants, I'm happy to.
And he has a very patient, soothing way of talking about these things too.
Yeah, I'm gonna need it. You know that's coming, Jeremy. I'm sorry we haven't officially met, and I'm sorry that we're going to meet by me asking you for a lot of hand holding, but that's what's gonna happen.
Good.
I can tell.
We all have gone through it. We've all gone through, a crash course in the budgeting and all the financial pieces.
David, you spoke of Jeremy's soothing voice. I could hear him just simply say, sir, you've gone bankrupt. And you feel okay.
I'll let you know quite a bit before we get there.
See, I don't ever want to have that conversation with you, Jeremy.
No. So, all right. Well, unless there are any other questions for the we can move on to additional reports. iGov.
Did you take my place, Matt, on Saturday?
No.
So I had a conflict and I let them know. And with our beloved Marianne coming off, I do not believe the library was represented.
Okay. Not a problem. I'm sure we can get notes from somebody. Then COG met. We shared information. That and there was nothing really remarkable about that. The new superintendent of D200 was on along with Joy Lynn, and I believe that was kind of
we said farewell to the departing elected officials.
Yes. Yes, we were in the midst of swearing-ins when that meeting happened.
Our next meeting is in about 2 weeks. No,
that sounds correct. And ILA legislation and advocacy. We are working on a program of Ready, Set, Advocate that will be a toolkit for libraries to use in advocating with local legislators for libraries that have appointed boards and have to go through a village or another entity that they have to, that they get their budgeting through, outside of their organization, their official budget processes come through another entity that they will, how to help make their cases for that. So that's, I will share it when it is in a combined document. Right now, it is in a series of about a dozen different documents based off the topics in the program, because it's broken out into different people working on it. So once that is all assembled, I'll be able to share that with everyone. But that's kind of where we're at on that committee. Was there a meeting of the Friends?
There was the annual meeting of the Friends. They have a new member who's a very big fan of the book fair. I would say David kept the team moving forward. They're having some really, I think, difficult conversations about their mission statement and what they really want to deliver. And I'll be honest in sharing that I think Some of them feel like their biggest value to the community is in fact the book fair and not the programming that they bring to the library by enabling fundraising dollars, which is, tricky because I think some members would argue that their purpose is to fund the library and the wonderful programming that they enable. But they very much are tied to the value that they've provided to the community through the book fair. And I tried to do some gentle probing on some of their perspectives based on the anti-racism work that we're doing and how they might want to learn from, some of the conversations that are being had by the library team and how that might inform the way that they're thinking about the value of the fair. And I don't know that really was understood. I don't know, David can say, I was like, am I pushing too hard? I was chatting with him on the side.
I think you were far, far too subtle, Sarah.
I think I was too subtle. I don't think they understood me. But I think overall for this group to understand, there is some awareness, I think, with Paul, Bookbinder specifically, that they do really need to focus on what do they want to accomplish for the community, and whatever whatever mechanisms need to be built, alternative fundraising ideas need to be brought forward. They need to kind of ground themselves in what do they want to accomplish for the library through their goals, and then kind of take separate and distinct what is their commitment to the book fair and what does that change look like. And David did offer, again, the idea of letting them have access to our spaces for a series of weekends, potentially to do maybe targeted book fairs. That led them down, I think, a bit of a winding road. And they understand that that's a benefit to not have the additional expenses, but they still didn't commit to doing it that way. So the story goes on.
We try, Sarah, we try.
We're going to keep. We talked about trying to revitalize the fundraising committee, and they were all kind of like, yeah, that's a good idea. But then they didn't do any action about it. So we'll see. I still harbor hope that Marianne is going to run some kind of takeover scheme. We'll see. Maybe in all her free time.
Yeah.
Thank you for trying, Sarah.
Good people, kind hearts.
For sure. For sure.
Opportunities. Let's say it that way. Lots of opportunities.
Hey, Sarah, I know our friends group is a little bit different, but have we talked about maybe them meeting up with some other local area friends groups to see what they do or how they accomplish some of their goals and maybe reinvigorate them that way?
There is a lot of reticence about membership and kind of to earn your way in is kind of that you've been a historical book fair person. I don't know. And I think that's part of, Virginia, my point about learning from just the work that the library team is doing with support from the anti-racism committee. They're not even like looking around our own building right now. So I don't know. I kind of like to figure out if there's a way to connect with maybe a couple of members, and maybe David and I can offline with you about a couple of people that I think might have a willingness to have some more thoughtful conversations.
Yeah, there are
and then see if we can kind of work it through them. I do think if I brought it up in a meeting, they would just be like, why would we talk to anybody else? We've been doing this for 50 years.
Oh, you've learned them so well in such a short period of time, Sarah.
So I don't know. I think we can run a plan. I just have to figure out the entry point. We'll get there, maybe. But thank you, Virginia. I appreciate that thought.
And we have the employment and separation from employment report. Okay. That concluding those reports, we'll move on to new business. where we declare a vacancy on the Board of Library Trustees. As there were 4 seats up for election, and one of the candidates has the candidate who finished in the top 4 and said they will not be taking the oath of office. I did forward her email and that she sent after the election that was sent to Vicky and myself. I forwarded that on to everyone. Unless there is objection, I think we can accept that as her intent, and also her not attending the meeting tonight as her intent to not assume the office. And we can have a motion to declare a vacancy on the Oak Park Public Library Board.
So moved.
Moved by Ted. Is there a second? I saw Virginia trying to second.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, will the secretary take the roll call vote, please?
Virginia,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Ted,
Yes.
Motorima,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Sarah's a yes.
Okay. All right. Well, now we have to get into the way we fill said seat. David had prepared a document based off his experience of other boards filling vacancy seats where there was a period of time where people who are interested can send in their information, their interest. The trustees review, bring. Dave, do you happen to have that open?
I don't, but I can pull it up if you want.
If you could, please.
It'll just take me a minute.
No problem.
Find it.
A review process, and then an interview process, and a discussion amongst the board, and we vote to put that person in. And this person will serve until the 2023 village elections. This will be a 2-year appointment.
And Matt, while David is bringing up the document, I have a question for Jody. That whatever we decide is the process, I'm assuming, Jody, that you will know how to get this out to the community at large, the process.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure there's probably some rules around what we have to do as well that I'll be learning.
Okay. Yeah, so I think Matarima, you weren't on the board email list at the time, but we've already received 2 messages of interest from members of the community about it, and we will and I will, now that we have declared the vacancy, I think it would be fair to reach back out to them and see if they are still interested. It has been not that long, but circumstances change, and I think it's only fair to make sure that they still want it.
So can I have, without, before I know who's interested, I think especially, I was just wondering, because obviously Pete is no longer interested. I believe there was one that you talked about, referred to today, an email, which opposed the assignation of Pete into that. I don't know what
Yes.
the correct verb would be.
The appointment, yeah.
The appointment, okay. So, but I just wanted to air I have this slight discomfort of me choosing my colleague when it's, or me being part of a process that chooses my colleague, when obviously the process should have been other people choose my colleague. Does that make sense? Like so I'm just wondering, and when we're thinking about like these, the people who state their interest in running and I don't know that we can call it candidacy. I'm not by any means suggesting that we have another special election or anything, but I'm wondering if there's a way to include more public voice in the process to make, I don't know if that makes sense as a question.
I think you could deal with it, Madarima, through public comment. I mean, I think if we, and I guess we have to talk about the format. What I've seen, I've talked to a couple of peers who have been in other library systems where they've had appointments and they have had an application process, and then they have asked the individuals to come forward at a designated time to kind of make public statement, and then also invite the public to be there to offer public statement. So if, you know, someone has concern, you know, they can publicly go, you know, join that meeting and speak on behalf of me or in opposition to me. And in those cases, you know, it was a pretty clear set of people who were interested, who understood the parameters of running. I think the one thing I'd be sensitive to, and I had this conversation offline with Matt, you know, this isn't unique. This happens across elected bodies kind of every day. So I think as long as we're very clear and transparent about the steps that are required and we give good notice, you know, we shouldn't feel unusual or, you know, inappropriate in any way that we're doing something that bodies all over the country do regularly. So I think as long as we're not, you know, quiet or sneaky about how we advertise the position.
Bodies all over the country make bad decisions all the time, right?
And so, we may make a bad decision.
No, sure. The point is just like, in theory, I would like there to be a space for dissent. Do you know what I mean? So obviously that's built into like the electoral process, right? Like if you have
You've moved to the right community for that.
There will be that.
Yeah, I mean, right. You're right. Like
I think we have to also keep in mind that this is for 2 years. There will be a chance for this person to run on their own merits in that village election, in the next village election. And David, and I and the lawyers looked at the statute. We can't do a special election for this. Before that, it has to be the municipal election. So we can't do like a special election at the primary election that's coming up in less than a year.
Right.
So we
well,
need
in
to,
any case, I can't imagine a more expensive thing. And I have a feeling, I have a feeling the Oak Park community may not be very excited about having, you know, another expense. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting a special election. I think I mean, I would love to hear David's suggestions for like a particular process. I guess I'm wondering if there's a possibility of including a voice that's not the current sitting board in that review process, you know, not just because we're not beholden to take into account the public comment, right? Like we hear it and hopefully it makes makes people can change our minds, but like that doesn't count as a vote. So that, I guess that was my question, if there was a way to do something like that.
Can you all see the document on your screen?
Yes, David.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So yeah, so right. So in this process that I outlined after Matt asked me to suggest a process, there is certainly the opportunity to be as transparent as you want to be about the submissions that you receive by naming those individuals, asking them to appear at a public meeting, to talk about their candidacy, to invite public comment on the qualifications of those prospective candidates, to ask as many questions as you want. In the end, the decision, you know, is statutorily is the decision of the board. When a vacancy is declared, it is the board, the properly seated board that decides who is going to fill that vacancy. And at the end of the process, you know, Matt just mentioned that the person is only appointed to serve for the next 2 years, approximately, until the next consolidated election in April 2023. So our library's attorney also reviewed this process, and it was following their review that I actually added an option B to number 4 regarding the collection of submissions or collecting names of people to potentially run. You can either, again, do that completely transparently in an open session, or state statute permits you to do the entire process within the confines of a closed session if you want, in which case that sort of removes the transparent aspect of that, and nobody gets to know, aside from you, the board members, no one gets to know who has submitted their names, and no one gets to know what you have said about those submissions until you're ready to announce who is going to fill the vacancy. My assumption was, even before I talked to the attorney, that would not be how you would want to do it. I had that conversation with him and said, I'm pretty sure my board is going to want to do this in a more open and transparent way, but you have the option, and I wanted to make sure that you knew that you have that option, that state statute allows you to do it almost completely in a closed session if you want to.
David, when I asked earlier today about returning to in-person, I'll go ahead and let it slip. This is what was in my brain. Yeah. That there just might be a little bit of public comment.
Sure.
And I feel like Zoom might be the most equitable way for us to make sure that people can make comments, and that we can have as many people come to comment or come to watch the process as possible. Yeah. Yeah, I don't love part B. I'm glad you put it in there. I'm glad you let us know that it was an option, but no, I agree with you. I don't think that's how we want to handle filling what would usually be an elected position. I would like to talk a little bit about a timeline, because as we start talking about the equity framework and maybe a master facilities plan and a lot of other big things coming out of 2020, I want there to be 7 people. And I want us to have a full board. Can we add, and maybe this is a question for Jody as well, can we add additional special sessions to move through some of the yes. stuff part of it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, we can.
Absolutely.
So that we can make sure when these candidates are present, they're present at a regular board meeting that the community is used to seeing, and that they're used to seeing on their schedule. So can we kind of off kilter ourselves to set this up to be something that's ready for a regular meeting? And then to that, I'm guessing we probably can't get ourselves ready for June. So are we saying we're going to take, the month of June to inform everybody of the process and get the candidates, then try to present them in July and then come up with a decision for August? Or how fast can we do this?
Well, again, I think that really is entirely up to you and how quickly you think you want or can work as a group to do it. And yes, you can certainly call or as many special meetings as you want to do the work. And all we need, of course, is, at least 48 hours notice and an agenda to do that. And there is in statute, there is no timeline specified. I think the only word that's used is timely. So whatever you consider to be a timely process to appoint someone in a timely manner, that's all that state statute says. So, if you want to, get it done in a month, you want to take 6 months, it's really up to you. So, but yes, we can certainly schedule special meetings to do it.
I just want to make sure that when we are presenting these people to the public, I'd like it to be at a regularly scheduled board meeting, because I feel like that's the most fair option to the public. It's going to be when they expect to hear from us. I'm open to thinking otherwise if we feel like we can get the message out there. But from where I'm sitting right now, I feel like that's going to be the best way for us to get the most community input on whoever is there. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get interest back of, I know we have 2, I know a couple of people have spoken to me. I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get, their applications and narratives and whatever else back from them so that we can act on them.
I don't feel like we're not asking them to write a dissertation, right? We're looking at like some basic inputs, maybe a public narrative
Basic,
about why they're
yeah,
qualified. Like, I feel like it's a reasonable, to give someone doesn't feel, I don't think we need to give people months. Do you guys? I mean, am I overreading this?
it's not up to me, but I would say, no, you don't.
So
My-
David,
Go ahead.
basically after this meeting, and we've declared a vacancy, it's up to you and Jody to get this out to the public in a PR way. And,
Yes.
and then I think to Virginia, to your point, how do we get beyond the PR? Because this is not an election.
I wouldn't, given the fact that we have had more press in the Wednesday Journal in the last like 2 months than I can ever remember. That isn't about programming.
Right.
I
That is
anticipate
true.
we will get coverage in the Wednesday Journal about this process. I have never been quoted in the press so much in my life, for better or worse. And so yes, I think we will, there will be the library social media. I plan on whatever we post, resharing it in community groups in Oak Park on Facebook and, and those things. So I think we will get the reach. And I think what we, in my mind, what I was contemplating was, so today is the 25th, that we have, if we can get, I don't know if we want to just have them send it to the board email address, or we want to create its own email address for it, or a form on the website for people to email, that we give like a week and a half, 2 weeks for people to send stuff in. And then perhaps we do we take a couple days, and if we want, assuming, unless it's a huge number of people, if it's a reasonable number of people, I don't know what that number would be, we have a special meeting where people come and make a presentation on Zoom. And because then that will get uploaded to YouTube and people can view it at their leisure and get back to us at our next in-person meeting with comments and feedback from the public. So, I mean, I think if we are quick about this and we have a special meeting before our June meeting, which is the 22nd, in 4 weeks, I mean, it's possible we can make that decision. I think if we don't do it that way, I think we have candidates, the people who are interested speak at the June meeting, and we have a special meeting shortly thereafter where we discuss them after hearing feedback from the public, and do that. Because ideally, I would like to have all 7 people seated in time for any strategic meeting we have in July.
Especially if we're going to talk budget in July.
Yeah, if we're going to start doing that, but I would like to have someone in that place. So whether it's we have people who apply, speak at a special meeting before the June meeting and we take public comment in June, or we have them speak at June and we have a special meeting afterwards where we vote on that, have like a closed session discussion and a vote on that decision a week or so after the June meeting. I think that's fine, but my hope would be to have someone in place before we do our meetings in July, so we can have all 7 people on board.
I do have I'm sorry, Sarah, were you raising your hand?
I don't know. I was just going to say, I think I would prefer, if we're going to have more than 2 or 3 people make statements, I don't think we do it coupled with the meeting. I think it'll make the meeting painfully long in June if we try to do, what if we have 7 people who submit and then we have them all make public statements as part of the June board meeting? Like, I think that that's,
Yeah, if instead you, I think, do what I think maybe Matt was suggesting, that you ask to have all of the written submissions in time for the June meeting so that you can announce who and what they are, and then have a special meeting scheduled for a week or 2 after that, and have the public statements and interviews, if you will, at that meeting. You can always also go into a closed session at a special meeting if you wanted to go into a closed session, just so that the board can talk about the interviews and the questions and the answers, and then schedule a final decision at the July meeting.
Would it be possible for us to get their narratives or submissions, however that's going to be formatted, before the June meeting, and then not necessarily have them make a statement, but just have them available for public questions and comments at the June meeting? That way, to Sarah's point, if there are 11 people, we're not giving everybody, 10 minutes to speak, but we could make sure that their statements are part of the general board packet that people could look at and take a look at beforehand, and then they could show up with questions for specific candidates should they have those, and then we could schedule the special session
Sure.
afterward to make a decision.
Sure.
I like that a lot, Virginia.
Forgive me for sharing my calendar here, because there's all kinds of stuff on here that is immaterial. But
As a point of order,
yeah.
Are we suggesting that at the special session, we would provide an opportunity for all candidates to speak?
Go ahead, Matt, but that's what I was hearing.
Yeah, I think unless there is a decision prior, by us prior to that, to limit it to a select group of, if we get 20 or 30 applicants, we may need to, prior to that special session, rank them and limit it to a certain number of most viable, for lack of a better term, the ones that we think we would most likely be to choose, a ranked choice voting system or something among us that would, so that, again, we're not hearing from 20 people at 5 minutes each. If in reality we're not, we look at someone and kind of all internally understand that this person would be a non-starter. So I think that the idea of having a window of application leading into the June meeting, and then having a list of names of those who have applied to be part of our agenda for the June meeting, and then a week or so after the June meeting, having a special meeting where candidates would have a chance to make a public statement to the board, and then we would ask questions of them, and then go into a closed session to discuss.
Would
I
we
like
still have
Virginia's
time?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, would we still have time in that June meeting for the public to ask questions directly of that list of candidates?
I am inclined, I'm afraid of that getting out of hand. I'm wondering if a better way would be to have public questions come through the board for submission, just because what I'm afraid of happening is a fight. I don't know who's going to apply, but I'm concerned about, while there could be definitely concerns brought to light, personal grievances turning into hostility during that kind of confrontational questioning from the public.
So, I'm sorry, was somebody going to say?
Yes, I'm sorry, this is, may I just say, can we get from David and Jody a kind of a list of talking points about this vacancy? Because we basically, we're not doing a job description beyond what the specific 3 points of what a library trustee does. And so that as we all go forward, we're simply saying, if you're interested in being a library trustee, here's that we have a vacancy. Because what happens in an election is that basically people say, I'm going to get my 25 signatures and be on the ballot. So we're not looking at any kind of qualitative character of our candidates. We're looking for a broad distribution of the fact that there's a vacancy.
I think that, at least for me, the question here is, when does the public get to weigh in? Because to Madhurima's point, this is not an election. This person was not elected. And while we are not beholden to what the public says, we are still elected officials. And I want to provide the most convenient way for the public to see these options, and make comment if they need to. I completely understand, Matt, that there are going to be, that it has the potential to be messy. I'm open to looking at ways that we can mitigate that, like maybe questions have to be submitted in writing through the chat, or maybe they have to be submitted in writing 24 hours beforehand, and we limit how many people are speaking over Zoom. But I feel like in non-COVID times, this would be, in the veterans room, and people would be showing up to say whatever and back their person or not, but there would be a little bit more of a way for them to have their opinion heard by us before we make that choice. I think I'm okay with us making the choice in a separate session. I just really want to make sure that we have time in our regularly scheduled library board meeting for the public to interface with whoever these people are directly.
So, in one of the board's regular meetings, not in a special meeting that you call.
That would be my preference for the public. Any discussion about them afterward, or in us accepting and looking at whatever applications or narratives they provide to us, sure. But for public comment and for public input, I think it should be during a regularly scheduled library meeting.
Then, yeah, and again, I'm sorry, the process is of course entirely up to you. If that's how the board wants to do it, then I'm not sure I would necessarily see the point in a special meeting, because you can, if you're going to accept all the public comment during the regular meeting, you can either have your then subsequent conversation as a board in the open meeting, or you can go into closed session at the same meeting. I'm not sure you necessarily have to schedule a special meeting in that case, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm with Virginia on this one. I mean, that was the crux of my comment about hearing from everyone who has presented themselves to the board for consideration, is that I feel very strongly that we provide an opportunity for people to do that. I also completely understand Sarah's point about an interminable board meeting. I think we can control for that by limiting people's remarks to a certain time period. And would I love to have 20 candidates for the library board? Yes, I would. I don't think that that's in the cards this year. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think if we limit folks to spoken, 5 minutes or whatever, even less if we want to go that route, I feel very strongly about, at a regularly scheduled board meeting, allowing for candidates to present their case to the board.
Can I,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, Sarah. I have a couple of things. One was really quickly, I wanted to ask David, you, according to this, 4B, the option that nobody on the board seems to want to take, was the one that was recommended. So what are we missing? Just efficacy of process, like
Yeah,
it would move
you know,
quicker?
like why you're wondering why that's the one that he recommends?
Yeah.
Because he's an attorney, and because and because he thinks that I mean, I part of his response to me was, well, you know, what if, you know, will you dissuade people who might want to offer their service in a volunteer capacity like this if they think they have to be paraded in front in a public meeting and justify their application?
Well,
And I said, well,
it's an elected position otherwise, right? So that,
right.
and though I take Matt's point, I think that like truncating an entire election cycle into one evening would be something to behold. Like I don't know that we're ready to take all of the drama and put it into a small port. I was just wondering, it seems like some of the ambiguity comes from the fact that we don't really know if this is going to be massively popular and attract absolutely everybody, or if it's going to be the people who've already expressed an interest and stay at that, right? Like this is, am I correct in understanding that this is part of the worry? Because
if I can be perfectly honest with you, I do not think you are going to get an inordinate number of applications to fill this 2-year term. I think, and I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I would be surprised if you would get 3.
Okay, well, I mean, so I am in agreement with Virginia and Colleen that I think that the most transparent conversation interfacing that we can have between public, even if nobody shows up for public comments or whatever, but just providing that opportunity, I think is really important, because this has been kind of, you know, well, you know better than me that this has been sort of an odd election, and there's been, you know, so I think for the sake of clarity and for the sake of everything, my recommendation would be to have that interface as much as possible. My second question before we got into this discussion was going to be, I think sort of to Ted's point, like what are the questions that people are going to be responding to? Because to run for elections did not have to answer any questions, you know, like obviously there was the activist toolkit or whatever, but those were voluntary basis. But to put in my candidacy, I of course did not have to, you know, like present any kind of a character statement. So that to me seems, and I mean, I'm wondering, I guess the spin is that maybe this can be something that the public can weigh in on, like with the actual questions that we put. So you have people who express their interest on the basis of just their interest, the 3 things that Ted pointed out about here's what the library board does. And if there are specific questions that the people are interested in, are interested in, like those be part of what candidates can be prepared to speak to during the meeting.
I think we should have them reiterate anything that we've asked of them in advance. I think that, to me, you know, there's kind of two pieces. One, you know, we don't have any responsibility. We could literally, Matt said this in jest, but we could take all the eligible voters in the village and put them in a hat and draw a name, right? There's no requirement that anybody do anything to submit themselves, right? But right now, if we say, please send your name to David, you know, we're not providing the public with anything except their name, and then they're just gonna like Facebook stalk people, which is fine, right? That might happen anyway. But I think if we give, you know, some baseline questions around, you know, nothing, I think, taxing or complicated. I think honestly, some of the questions asked by the Wednesday Journal may have been like from a place that was a little combative in our
This-
time period.
I mean, this process that I outlined, just basically says to submit a written statement, and in that statement say why you would like to be selected to serve on the library's board of trustees, why you think you're qualified to serve, and why you think you would make a worthy candidate. Just very, very
Pretty
simple,
generic.
very generic, simple statement. If you wanted to be more specific than that in what you're asking people to submit up front, you certainly can. But in this process, it's just a very, very simple statement of interest. I would like to be considered. This is why, and this is why I think I'm qualified.
I'd almost like to be less specific. Can we just outline what the duties are that we have all assumed to be on this board?
Sure.
And then just say, in light of having read that, go forth and write something not too terribly long, please.
I mean, I think it's nice to have something common, like, why are you interested in serving on the board of the library?
But I guess, Sarah, my point is that I didn't have to answer that question. And more to the point, Soraya did not have to answer that question to get elected. She didn't.
But you did. You participated in panels.
She wasn't part of the activist toolkit, and she wasn't part of the Wednesday Journal, and she got elected to the position. So
Well,
she did.
And
But we have to have something to base it on.
Well, I mean, I agree that the actual decision making has to be based on something. I am in.
Or we could, to your point, take the 5 names and draw one out of a hat.
Right. I mean, that was not my point, but yes, I see that would be legally fine. I see that would be within the due process. I just don't think. I'm trying to allow for people to express their interest in the same openness that was given to me. Like, I had to make that decision to run or not. I did not have to answer any of those questions. I chose to answer them, and I chose to answer them seriously, and I would like to believe that had some effect, right? But I'm just saying that the actual throwing your hat in the ring part, I am in agreement with Virginia. It can just be, here's the job description. If this is something that you would like to do for 2 years, let us know. And then in the actual, like when they interface or when we, whatever, have them speak to the public, if it's in the form of a written statement, anything that we're sharing with the public, we can actually ask them to write that statement. But I think just expressing an interest should not have to come with a written assignment.
I guess the question would be, though, we didn't have to take questions from the public. So now we're asking them to come to a public meeting and take questions from the public, which is something you didn't require of me or of you.
No, we were asked to vote. People were asked to vote for us. So that we're not asking people to vote again because it's an expensive process.
Right, but I guess I think my question is the same. If we say, like, everyone who wants to throw your hat in the ring, throw your hat in the ring.
Yeah.
And we're gonna decide who the person is based on your name.
We can make the statements, as to the point of we didn't have to answer those questionnaires. Say, what's your name? Are you a resident of Oak Park? I mean, that's a legal requirement, and say, are you a resident of Oak Park? And then say, should you choose, please make a statement explaining why you would like to be on the library board. And that'd be it. I mean, again, it is that option. But I think it is also would be good to include on whatever that communication piece is, saying, please expect that there will be questions from the board members during this process, and possibly communicated questions from the public, during this process, to let them know that this will be part of it. We don't know what all those questions would be. Maybe we get no questions from the public. But I think that we make the statement of why they want to be on the board optional, and we also disclose and say, you may you will be questioned at least by board members. And you don't be surprised if other people want to ask you questions about this. I think that is, does that sound like a reasonable accommodation of some of the interests and concerns that I'm hearing?
I think so, Matt. I think I'd like to see something that says on there, you know, the information that you submit will be made available to the board, but will also be made available to the general public for, you know, public comment and to allow them to weigh in on. I think that will sort of, to everybody's point, yeah, well, this isn't an election, but somehow we still have to get input, but we can't really dictate what kind of input, but we have to say something so that we get some sort of sentences out of people. I think if we put a statement on there that, and Jody's far more articulate than I am, that says, hey, we're doing this because you're not going to get the regular, you know, constituent interaction that we all had when we were running. We're trying to put in place something that will allow something similar. Could you please make a statement so that people have a way of weighing in on what your priorities are? I think that's all we're trying to do, is not lead them too far, leave them enough space to really say why they want to do it without saying you have to tell us why. And I think we saw that in the submissions we've already seen. You know, there was nothing to prompt the people who wrote us anything. They looked at the duties of the trustees. They looked at what, you know, they thought the priorities were of the board, and they wrote us a short letter, you know, to summarize why they wanted to be a candidate. That's all I want to see. I just want to see that, you know, whatever they want us to know about them going into this process. And I think I'm just a little afraid of giving them too many questions to guide them down a certain direction when that may not be exactly what we need to know.
I think as we look at the timeline, what we want to do immediately is to say that there is a vacancy on the board, and then simply to say statutorily, this is what a library board trustee does. And then if you are interested, please let us know. That's going to happen. And that's, I think, is all we need to do, because that's all that is asked of somebody running for an election. In the long run, it is this group of 6 people that's going to have to make the qualitative decision, but that's down the line.
I have a question for David and probably Jody, is how soon, if we wanted to do this as a form similar to what we do for public comment on our website, how soon would you be able to get that up online?
Oh, I think Jody and Mallory could turn that around by the end of the week. I mean,
Definitely.
creating the form is no problem at all.
Okay.
We could have that up really very quickly. And especially if it's just, you know, your name, are you a resident? What is your age? Because there is a legal age requirement. And, you know, make a statement, right? And then someone fills that out, that form comes to us. If you wanted to have, the board wants to have those ahead of the June meeting, we could set a deadline of a week before, which I think is like the 15th or the 16th of June. We would then deliver all of those to all of you individually. You'd have a week to take a look at them, and then they'd be on the agenda for the June meeting.
And we would just put something on that form that says, sort of, we'll see you at the June meeting on this time at this,
yeah,
whatever.
We can make it, if that's what you, if part of the requirement is that you need to appear at the June meeting, then we would need, you know, we would say that a part of this process to be considered is being present at the virtual June meeting so that you can present or respond to questions or whatever, however you want to say it. Yeah.
I would make that voluntary, because somebody might not show up, and then that's it, because that's basically what happens when the Wednesday Journal wants to interview a candidate.
we could include on the form saying you will be given an opportunity to address respond to questions at the June meeting.
Sure. Yeah. However you want to say it,
That's a fair point, Ted. It's like we can make it mandatory, but I think it is, I think that, to the points of other optional things, it might be better just to say, there will be to be there. And we can take into account that person's non-attendance of the June meeting as part of our decision-making process.
Yes.
However good their resume may be.
Yes, the decision is ultimately yours, the board's. So does that sound like a reasonable process? Jody and I and Mallory can get this out in a matter of a couple of days.
One last request. Can we add a place for them to load documents should they choose to do so?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you.
I was gonna say it sounds good to me, but I'm concerned because Sarah's dropped off, so I don't know if we should.
She was putting kids to bed, so this does not sound too dissenting or too different from what I was hearing from her in terms of what she was hoping to make sure we get out of this process. But I'm open to anybody else suggesting otherwise. So I think we will direct David and Jody and Mallory to put that form together to go up on the website with a cutoff for the 15th, which is the week before
the June meeting.
That way we will have a list of names to include on the agenda and a list of names and materials for the board to review in that time.
Great. And in addition to putting the form on the website, of course, we'll, advertise the opportunity through all the usual ways that we do. Emails, local media, social media, it'll all be out there.
Can somebody reach out to the people who already expressed interest and ask them to formally resubmit?
Absolutely, I will take care of that personally.
Yeah,
we also had a point about having the materials be available to the public. Is that so? They would be included in the board packet, which are obviously public facing. But I'm wondering if there's another way to just like call attention to those materials specifically. Does that make sense? So that there's I don't know if there's a way to do that, but just some place that we can direct people to. Like, here are the people who are interested, and here's what they've had to say.
Well,
is that possible to do? I see Jody nodding, but I don't.
Well, go ahead, Jody. I mean, all I was going to say was, certainly we can do it however we want. The typical way, as you said, would be we put all of those materials into the board packet. The board packet goes out, several days before the meeting, and it's a public document, and anyone who wants to review those materials, all they have to do is look at the board packet. But what were you going to say, Jody?
We can point everyone who we have an email for, which is around 27,000 emails above 18 years old, and say, these are the people. And now granted, that is not the same as putting something in the newspaper, because we have to have your email to send that to you. But to me, that would be due diligence on our part to let our patrons know these are the individuals, this is the information they shared. If you are interested in public comment or watching, this is a public meeting. So.
A last point. One of the reasons we're having this extended conversation is that in the bylaws, there was no stipulation as to exactly what would happen in this case. And I'm assuming that that's just fine, because anytime that this kind of anomaly happens, it's going to be strangely unique. Don't you agree, David?
I absolutely agree. And I don't know if that's why state statute is so ambivalent about how you go about this, but it is completely up to you how you choose. You can, yeah, you can do it however you want, basically.
Well, I choose not to see it as ambivalence as much as empowering the boards to set their own direction.
That's better. Thank you, Ben. I forgive me. I didn't mean to imply that the state legislature is ambivalent about anything.
This is Rita. I'll just make one comment. I don't normally talk, but we have had a couple of appointments in the past. Usually it's been when a current board member has resigned. And the first one I remember, and it hasn't ever been because somebody bowed out of an election, but the first one I can remember was Janet Kellenson was originally an appointee. And then she ran when that shorter term was up for reelection.
Okay. Yeah, I could, there's not been an appointment since I've been on the board. I do remember there being one. My dad remembered there being one, but he couldn't remember who it was. So, okay.
Yeah, there hasn't been one in the 8 years that I've been here.
Yeah. So
are we all set?
I believe, David and Jody, do you feel like you have enough direction from us?
I think we
on
do.
which way to go?
Yep.
Okay, good. Now we will move on to renew the financial support for collaboration early childhood.
So at the end of the letter that John Barrero submitted is this. We've always built this into our budget, assuming that the library was going to continue to support the work of the collaboration. So, I mean, it's, from my point of view, this is really a formality. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to reiterate your support through a vote if that's what you want to do. So that's how I put it on the agenda.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this renewal?
So moved.
Moved by Virginia. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ted. I will take the roll call in Sarah's absence. Colleen.
Aye.
Ted.
Aye.
Virginia.
Aye.
Mahrima.
Aye.
And Matt is an aye. And Sarah is absent. That is approved. Thank you, everyone. And next was I asked David to put this on the agenda because after the last COG meeting and some of the other stuff, there was a discussion as some of the other boards are starting to, and other boards around the area, not just in Oak Park, are starting to resume in-person meetings, and wanted to kind of, start to put on everyone's radar the possibility that we may be, what would be the possibility of resuming in-person meetings, folks' comfort levels as we move forward. I'm not trying to push us into this by any stretch, but I do think that it is reasonable to expect a return at some point, and I just wanted to have that on our radar. I'm just wondering what folks' thoughts are at this time about that.
Well, I love the thought that we have meetings in the veterans room. And I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask how many of the board members have been vaccinated, because I don't think that that is an appropriate question. But having the large space of the veterans room certainly does allow social distancing. But I think we're still waiting to hear from the state, aren't we, David?
Meaning what? As I said earlier, the emergency declaration is still in order. Boards are still allowed to determine for themselves whether they consider it safe to meet in person and can continue to meet virtually just as you are now. There's no indication right now of when exactly the governor might change that or when the state might rescind the emergency declaration. When it does, I would assume that they would give boards time to adjust and resume in-person meetings, but I don't know. So as of today, you can continue to meet in virtual session just as you are. But once the state, the governor decides to lift that declaration, that emergency order, then at that point you would have no choice but to resume in-person meetings.
So as we think of the June meeting, at this point, we have to assume that it will be virtual.
I think that's a reasonable thing to assume that the June meeting will still be virtual. If you wanted to, for instance, talk about a return to in-person meetings in July or in August, then we can be ready to make that happen.
I think I think it was Virginia, I think you had, perhaps, was it your suggestion that the attempt that our strategic meeting in July be an attempt at return to some level of in-person? I'm inclined to agree to that idea. If we can logistically make that work, because I think there is a level of discussion that can happen in person that can't happen in this format. There's a flow to interactions that I think is not conducive to a Zoom meeting, no matter how many times we do it and how much comfortable we are with the technology. The way it works, I think there's a benefit to being in person for just a level of interaction that's better. That's my opinion, but I don't want to put any. I want to hear from everybody else's your thoughts.
One of the reasons I wanted to start with the strategic meeting is, number one, it's a little bit longer. So we can gauge some of the things we're not thinking about right now, like drinking water because we're sitting there taking restroom breaks, and how we need to take care of that and still stay socially distanced. I also don't think it's attended by a lot of the public. So it would just be us wrestling with those issues and then seeing, okay, if we add public, if we add more library staff that needs to come to meetings, how is that going to look? Because in the strategic meeting, it'll pretty much just be us. So we'll have a little bit more leeway to sort of gauge what happens when we add additional factors or additional people, and then we can kind of go from there.
My only concern to returning in person would be the comfort level of the staff. That would, David, Rita, I would have to have like absolute assurances that everyone felt comfortable and not pressured to be back into a in-person setting.
Yeah, we're, the staff is preparing to start reintroducing more and more in-person services. We haven't resumed in-person staff meetings yet, but I'm expecting that's going to resume before too much longer. For the board's strategic planning meeting, I really wouldn't require any other staff members to be there, including the leadership team that didn't feel comfortable. I would certainly be there, and all of you, and then of course any members of the public that wanted to attend. So yeah, I think when the board is ready, if you want to try this in July, we can make that happen.
Would there be an option for a video? So if Jody or Andrew they could attend virtually.
Yes, we can, particularly if we do it in the veterans room, as is our plan with the improved technology that we have in there now. If we're all present, we can easily make that simultaneously a meeting that anyone else can participate in virtually if they want to.
And sorry, Andrew is my CFO, so I don't know who Andrew is. Andrew doesn't work for the library. I was thinking of Billy. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Andrew's my CFO at work. Yeah.
No worries. No. Yeah, no. We can make that. So that's not a problem. So in fact, that's another reason why I think, going forward, we want to have we want to have meetings like the board meetings in the veterans room, because I really think that the expectation is going to be that we are always, even when we go back to having meetings in person, we're always going to continue to provide virtual options for people to participate who can't and don't want to participate in person. And doing it in the veterans room, again, is going to be easier to do that with the improved technology that we've got in there now. So, and then typically, well, I think most years that we've done this, the strategic planning meeting that we do once each year is typically held on a Saturday. I'm going to assume that that's how you would want to do it again, is have it on a Saturday.
That's what I was guessing we would do.
Okay. Well, I will then immediately take a look at the calendar and propose a couple of Saturdays that look like they're available, and then you can all let me know, through a poll, what your preference is.
Sounds good. Thank you, David.
Sure.
All right. And our last item of new business, as part of our annual review of David's work, we had our review and we had our increased salary, but we also want to make a public statement for the record that would be in recognition, a formal recognition by the board of the work we felt that you have done in the last year. So I put together a resolution. Let me pull that up here. And it will read as a resolution to honor the service of David Sullivan as Executive Director of the Oak Park Public Library. Whereas David Sullivan was hired as the Library Executive Director by the Board of Library Trustees of the Oak Park Public Library in 2013. And whereas David Sullivan has dutifully and responsibly served in that capacity throughout the 8 years since the date of his hiring. And whereas the Village of Oak Park issued a shelter-in-place order on 18 March 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas David Sullivan made proactive plans and executed a closing of our physical facilities for the sake of the safety of library staff and the community at large. And whereas David led the staff in developing new programming and expanding existing services to provide services to the community in our time of crisis. And whereas David worked in conjunction with library staff and public health professionals to develop a return to service plan that centered safety of all who enter and interact with the library. And whereas David has continued to provide clear communications with the library board and the community as circumstances have changed at a rapid pace. And whereas David has distinguished himself in that service through his determination to improve the services and programs of the Oak Park Public Library and the lives of the people of the community he was hired to serve. Now, therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Library Trustees of the Village of Oak Park conveys its deepest appreciation to David Sullivan for his dedicated leadership and his compassionate service to the Oak Park Public Library and the community of Oak Park. Adopted this 25th day of May 2021 by unanimous vote of the Board of Library Trustees of the Village of Oak Park, Illinois.
Can you send a copy of that?
I will send you a copy, Rita.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ted got you just by a bit there. I'll take the roll. Colleen.
Aye.
Ted.
Aye.
Madrina.
Aye.
Virginia.
Aye.
Matt is an aye.
Very kind. Thank you.
You are very, very welcome, David, and it has just been I don't think they ever covered this in library school.
No. Maybe not.
David would take a bullet for the library.
Oh, you're sweet.
So,
Please
Yeah.
don't, though, David. Don't.
No,
Yeah, yeah. Maybe a bullet coffee thing. I
Yeah,
don't
let's
know.
not. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Having concluded all business, I declare our meeting adjourned until our next meeting in June. Or should the need arise for other. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, team.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Madrima.
Thank you.